Okay, so to process our rat behavioral data, once you've started Matlab, then you need to move to the directory where you have your video files and also the program that we use for tracking, the rat tracker for Matlab. So up here, this directory, and your view may look different depending on the version of Matlab that's running on your computer, but usually there's a address at the top here that shows you the current directory that you're in. And what you want to do is browse to find your directory. In my case, I have saved the file in a folder for Psych 233, under Labs, Maze Training, and I'm just calling it My Data. So this is the folder that I'm using to save all of my processing for this example. So if I select that folder, what you'll see in this view, which may appear in your, depending on how Matlab is set up by default, often there'll be a list of the files that are in your current directory over here on the left. But what you should see is that the address of the location you're in should match the folder that you've saved the video file you want to process and the program. Once that's set up, then at the command window, all you need to do is type the name of our file, rat tracker for Matlab, and then this will execute the commands that are in the program. What should happen then is that once the program loads, a figure will be created titled position tracking. Once it loads, then it will automatically ask you to find a file. And looks like I didn't set MP. Usually I would do MP4, but it looks like the extension's a little different because I just changed the setting. Yours should say MP4, so it should have come up by default. But I'm going to click on the Maze Training sample, hit open, and this may take a moment. As it loads the video and then grabs the first frame. Okay, so what should show now is the very first frame of our video. There's a slider along the bottom that you can use to move to different parts of the video, and at the top you'll see the position you're at in terms of minutes and seconds in the video. Later, when we start adding trials or identifying trials, it'll tell you if you're in a trial, and it'll tell you how far the rat has traveled in the current trial. But you should be able to move through and see any frame you want from the video. Okay, the way the tracking program works is that it takes a background frame. By default, that's the first frame, although if the maze is moved, we can reset the background later. And then for every subsequent frame, if we're tracking the rat's position, like in this case, we have a rat that's here starting off its trial in the south arm of this maze. And to track the rat's position, the program is doing a subtraction between the original frame and the current frame. And the only differences are where the rat is in this case. And shown in black here are all the cases where the rat, or where we have a difference or a pixel that's different in the current frame compared to the background frame. This subtraction button just toggles between the regular video, the actual frame, and then showing you the subtraction to show you what pixels would be used for tracking. You can change the threshold, like how different the pixels have to be before you'll identify them as possibly part of the rat. So anything that shows up in gray here is a pixel that could be used for tracking. So I've set the threshold now as low as just 1 pixel, 0 pixels. Okay. So any differences at all now will show up as gray or black, and that's just too low. In practice, you want to set this threshold to the point where small differences in the current frame compared to the background frame are ignored. Like you want this whole image to look white, and only the rat should show up in black. For most of our work, threshold of 10, which is the default, will be fine. Okay, when you're getting started, the first thing you want to do is just check the threshold. I like to go to a frame where I just have the rat and say, okay, threshold of 10, looks great. Then what I want to do is I'll switch back to the regular view, and now I want to find the first trial. So I'm just going to start at the beginning, and I'm going to move my slider over a little bit. This is just some information about this session, and then go a little farther. And you'll also have a paper sheet that will list the time that each trial started, or approximately when they started. And so I would know from that that the first trial started around 20 seconds or so. So at this point now, I have a frame where the rat has just been placed on the maze. If I look at the subtraction, what I can see is that this is the rat here. But there's also a lot of pixels that are crossing our threshold because I'm still in the frame. And also just even my shadow is causing us to see a signal. So normally what I like to do is look for the first frame where the rat is well isolated. So you see a nice black spot for the rat and no pixels connecting the rat to other stimuli like myself or objects. So you can use the play button to simply play the video from this point, and then I can hit play and then hit play again to stop the video. And this spot's pretty good because now the rat is kind of well isolated and there's a gap. If you look back at the video, I'm just turning to leave and the rat's still at his original position. And that'll be fine. If you didn't like that one, then you can use the arrows up here to move back one frame at a time or forward one frame at a time. Like if you want to get just a little more separation. Or you can also use the double arrows to move 1 second. That's a little too far. Or 1 second backwards in time. And so honestly, if I were working with this video, I would probably take a frame right around here as the beginning of the very first trial. So to do that, I just need to tell Matlab, or tell the rat tracking program where the rat is. So over here, if you see this button called Set Position, then if I click that, then now I have a set of crosshairs where I can now tell the program where is the rat's current position in this frame. If I click it, then what we'll see is the red cross here, or plus sign. That indicates the position that I clicked. The blue circle indicates where the program has determined the rat to be, and the yellow circle is the radius used for calculating the rat's position. So basically the program says we'll take the rat's current position, or where the rat was in the previous frame, if there is one, and then use this yellow circle to say, well, look for any places where there is a difference that crosses the threshold we've set. So any difference greater than 10 in this particular subtraction. Then at that point, average all of the X and Y positions and simply take that average to be the rat's current position. It's not a particularly sophisticated tracking algorithm, but it will work for our purposes. At that point, now that I've identified the rat's position, once I hit play, now the program will continue tracking the rat in every frame. And so it will simply take the rat's previous position and then in the current frame look to see if there are any pixels above threshold and then average them. In the plot, the blue circle is now the rat's current position. Yellow is still the radius used for tracking. There's no red plus sign because you only see that on cases where you enter, like in frames where you've entered a position. So you can enter another position here. If you've made a mistake, let's say I hit set position and I set the position somewhere where the rat is not. This will disrupt tracking and it is problematic. What you can do though is if you simply hit clear event, you can remove that point from the tracking. So if you set a position by accident, it's in the wrong spot, you can actually just move it. Like in this case, I could reset it. You can only have one position per frame. Or if I don't want to input a position in a frame, I can hit clear event. In the same sense, if I were to hit end trial, if I were to say, this is the end of trial 1, That will then mark the trial to say this is actually the end of a trial. And if we were to continue playing the video and say, oh, actually, that was not the end of the trial, we can remove it by going back to the event. And so if you hit, if we move backwards in time a little bit, if you go to hit next event, it should move you to the next frame that has an event in it. And in this case, that was the frame that I marked as the end of the trial. So I can also clear that event and then continue tracking. And so this will just keep tracking until it reaches the end of a trial. And so what I generally like to do is go through a video, mark the beginning of each trial and mark its end. So, and again, if you have your notes from the session, you'll know about when this trial ends, but you can also just find it by moving forward a little bit, and you're looking for the spot where, okay, see here I'm walking in, and so this is going to be a good place. So at this point, I'm approaching to remove the rat, and so I will mark this as the end of the trial. And at that point then, now I've set the beginning and end of the trial, and that's at 104. So if we go back, so right now I've only tracked the position of the rat up through, well, I'll show you. If you hit next, if you're in a trial, in trial 1, then next will move you to the last position you've tracked so far. It won't move you to the end of the trial, but just to the last position we've tracked so far, which was at 40 seconds. If now I hit play, the program is going to keep tracking past that point in trial 1. And in this case, we're waiting for the rat to select one of these reward cups. And so for our analysis purposes, we'll mainly look at the time it took the rat to approach that location and retrieve his reward. And it was about 104. I came in, and you'll notice up here, at that point we marked it. We hit the -1, and now the trial has ended. And so now we're just playing forward. So at that point, we've now processed all of trial 1. And if I hit next, I'll move to the next trial, and it moves me to the beginning of trial 1. If I hit next again, it'll move me to the end of trial 1, to the point we marked as just before the frame we marked as a -1. And now it'll show me the tracking. It shows in a yellow line, solid thin yellow line, all of the position samples that we obtained for this session. The most recent ones are shown as a thick yellow line. This is the last 1 or 2 seconds of data. The position of the rat in this frame is still shown as a blue circle. The tracking radius is still a yellow circle. And we can see this is trial 1. And in this trial, the rat traveled 56 pixels total. So you'd have to convert that to distance and take into account the fact that this lens for the camera warps the view, so it's not a one-to-one conversion from pixels to distance. But still, this gives you an idea of about the distance the rat traveled on this particular trial. Okay, so we also have to go to the next trial. If we keep hitting play, we can just wait for the next trial to start, but generally it takes a few, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds to get the rat off the maze, to have me come back in to replace the food. Refresh that, and then, okay, so now the rat is now back on. So if I want to find the beginning, if I think I'm pretty close, I can just back up like 1 second at a time and say, okay, here, place the rat, hit subtraction, and you can go frame by frame if you want. And right about, and it might go just a couple more. That's pretty good right there. So then now I'm going to set position, and now the program knows this is beginning of trial 2. I hit play for a little bit. It'll track the beginning of trial 2, and now I'm going to try and move forward to the end of trial 2. might be a longer one. It's early in training, so the rat has a lot of time running around. Okay, so now this is where the rat has now been removed, or... Okay, yep, we're just picking him up. So if you look at subtraction, like if I go back, it's probably pretty good. Yeah. So we can end the trial. And at this point, we don't need every frame up to the point where we approached him, but it is nice just to have it in case we want to do any analysis. But I'll end the trial here. So now that's the end of trial 2. And now I'll look for the beginning of trial 3. Okay, here we go. And I'll back up. Okay, that's pretty close. And just go a couple of frames. Just looking for this to be a pretty clean gap. The tracking probably worked pretty good at this point anyway. But right about there. I'm going to set that as the position. Hit play, see if it's tracking okay. And that's good to do that for a couple of seconds, just to make sure you're not going to get pulled off by the signal from me leaping. If so, then the tracking program might start following me off and then be totally off. But now this looks good, and if we keep going, it's going to stay on the rat because there aren't any other signals around here. And subtraction. So now we need to end trial 3. And again, if you have your sheet, that will help you figure out, well, where should the next trial end approximately. And that can be helpful. The times may or may not correspond perfectly, depending on how good we were about writing them down. And this might be the last trial in this short video file. Yeah, looks like about right. Okay. So here the rat's, I don't think he's quite gotten the food yet. Goes in for the food. And then here I come in. Okay, that's too far. And I'm just going to end it right here. End the trial. And then that's going to be the end of this session. So there were 3 trials total. And at this point now, I have, if I go to next, I've completely finished tracking in trial 1. Trial 2, I've only tracked like a small amount. Yeah, in trial 3, again, I haven't tracked very much so far. So what you need to do then is to go to trial 2, and let's go to the start of trial 2. And then from now we need to finish our tracking, and so since we've set up the beginning and the end of each trial, then if I hit play at this point, the tracking will continue, and I just need to let this video play through the end of trial 3. And at this point you can do other things while you wait. It does need to run through because the program's actually calculating the position as the movie plays. And also, it may not run exactly in real time because it takes some time for it to process each frame. But hopefully it doesn't run too much slower than real time. But if you have homework to do or other reading, it's fine to work on that as long as you check back occasionally, and you just want to make sure that the tracking program is still with the rat. Occasionally there will be some weird signal and it'll be caught by an artifact and then get stuck. off of the rat, in which case you would want to go back and use the set position to help it follow the rat through those frames where it's being lost. And it may also be a sign you need to adjust the threshold. Maybe the threshold needs to be higher to get rid of background signal. It may also be a sign that your background image, like if the maze in this case has shifted, then the background image might need to be changed. And again, the thick yellow dots just indicate where the rat's been over the last couple of seconds, and so that should follow the rat. And if the rat sits in one place, they'll all pile up in the same spot. So it should be like a little comet tail that kind of shows you where the rat's been over the past several seconds. Okay, now we've hit the end of trial 2, and at this point we can just let the video play, but it's sometimes easier if you then say, well, let's go on to the next trial. This moves us to the beginning of trial 3, and if you hit next again, now this shows me the last point I tracked in trial 3, so if I hit play, now I can skip some of the time in between the trials, especially if that's a long time. Alright, so at that point now we are finished, and you should look through and just make sure it looks like on the beginning of trial 1 that we have the start of the trial. Looks good, and it looks like the rat's in the right place at the end. There's beginning trial 2, and now you can see the path the rat took through that trial. Here's trial 3. You can see the path the rat took in that trial, and everything looks good. Okay, at that point, all of your data are now saved in that same folder in a file that's called mazetrainingsample.mat or .mat. This is a Matlab file, and really this is the only thing we need for data analysis later on. So you don't need, as long as these copies of your videos are backed up somewhere else, like if you're just using them to analyze data that I have on my computer, then you don't need to keep this movie file in your directory. So you can get rid of it. But do keep the MAT file. That's the main thing that we need. Okay, so a couple other things. I mentioned that the tracking program looks at how does the current frame differ from the background frame. So there are cases where like this maze could shift and now the background frame will not work. So if you need to add a new background frame that will be used from that point on, then you can just simply say set or press the button set background, which will then use this frame as the background frame for all future comparisons. Now you don't always want to do that. So for instance, I could click it now. So if you look at the subtraction, I've got a rat here, I've got myself, or let's move to a spot where there's no rat. Okay, so let's look at this one here. So my leg is still in the frame. If by accident I were to hit set background, well now this frame is considered the background, and so there are no differences between the current frame and the background. However, as I leave, now it looks like there's a big signal over here because it's comparing this frame to the one with my leg in it, which is not optimal. So if you added a background frame by accident, if you hit remove background, you'll remove the background frame from the current, that's being used in the current image. And you can do that until you remove all the extra ones, and basically you'll be back to using the very first frame. So if you need to readjust the background, move to a clean frame, the first clean frame that you have, and set that as the background. If you selected the wrong one, just hit remove background. The only other thing I'll mention is that in some videos I've used before, the perspective comes out incorrect, and it turns out that I need to use a non-circular radius And so the buttons here let you adjust the radius of your tracking. I like 15 for the ones we've been doing. But you can also make the tracking window an oval by changing the scale on the x dimension. So you can make it an ellipse. Sorry, make it turn into an ellipse if you want. For most videos, really, you should be able to leave this at 1. It really should not be necessary to change that. Normally, you would set your, I mean, hopefully the defaults will work. The threshold of 10 and a radius of 15 is tracking well, but if not, you can adjust them here. Once you're finished, then if you have another video to process, if you press load, then you'll be able to load a new video, excuse me, but in this case I only have one, and so if I select that, then it will just load it again. So actually, if you do want to come back later and check your video, as long as this video file and its .mat file, the tracking data, are in the same directory, then you can go back and continue working on your session or just check your tracking. And that's it. If you run into any problems, just let me know.